Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on supercharging your SharePoint intranet with the latest announcements from SharePoint Conference 2019 in Las Vegas. My name is Vlad Catrinescu, product evangelist at Valo Intranet, and I will be your host for today's webinar. And I got the honor today and really super happy to be able to get you Brad McCabe, which is a senior product manager at Microsoft. He was part of the keynote at SBC 19, and he now owns all of the intranet part of Microsoft 365 to be here for you and to be able to talk to you directly and showcase what Microsoft has been working on. Before we get started and I give the stage to Brad, just a bit of housekeeping items. First of all, this webinar will be recorded. All of the recording, all of the slides and resources that Brad will share with you will be available for you. I'll send you an email probably tomorrow with all of this information. Also, please make sure to ask questions. You do not have the chance every day to have a senior product manager being able to ask him questions directly. So please use this webinar to ask all of the questions that you might have about intranets inside the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, and we get to all of them at the end of the webinar. This is it for me. I want to take as little time as possible, and now I'll give the stage with Brad. Brad, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone that is here for taking time out of your busy days and lives to spend the time with us. What I thought we'd do over the next 40 minutes or so, I want to run through some of the high-level announcements and such that we made at the SharePoint conference last week. We'll really focus in around a lot of the intranet portions. We'll look at a lot of demo in that space as well. And then we'll reserve about the last 15-20 minutes or so for Q&A and virtual discussion. What we'll do early on, I'll run you through a lot of the just different feature slides with a lot of the announcements. We're condensing down what was a very packed 90-plus minute keynote. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you can go out to the SharePoint Virtual Summit. You can not only watch the keynote that we'll kind of summarize here in full detail with many, many more demos and a lot more depth than we'll go into, but there's also a whole series out there on the SharePoint Virtual Summit that will take you through a lot of deeper content as well. So, SharePoint encompasses a huge amount beyond just the intranet. And so there were announcements all around. Kind of the first category, as I bucket them together, is sort of teamwork and business processes. So if you think about things like OneDrive, which is powered by SharePoint, you'll see a lot of enhancements there. We did a lot of work. You're very familiar with a lot of the file previewers for things like Word and PowerPoint and others. We continue to do work there to make things like Autodesk be available. As new media types become available, things like 360-degree image previews as well in that space. Kind of one of my personal favorite things that was announced in this teamwork and process space was really this ability to request files. And so what you can do here now as an owner with a OneDrive, for example, is you can set up a folder. Say maybe you're doing a request for proposals. You can set up that folder and you can then actually send a link out to all the recipients. They can upload files into there. If you've got, say, 10 different vendors uploading you proposals on your RFP, they'll only see the files they upload to that folder. You will see everyone's, but they can only see theirs. It's also really nice if you watch the demo here through the virtual summit. It actually appends on the name of the person that uploaded, so it's really easy for you also to kind of keep track, so you don't get 10 different files just called RFP in the folder. We continue to drive a lot in the mobile space and continuing to improve there. So we've done a lot of work around enhancing that mobile experience and the file picking experience in there, as well as bringing full fidelity to all of the shared files, the creation flow, etc. out there. SharePoint continues not only to power OneDrive, but also a lot of the teamwork and collaboration inside of Microsoft Teams. And we continue to bring those experiences together. So now when you're sharing files in Teams, you have full access, just like you do inside of OneDrive, to adjust exactly how those files are shared across folks. Another one of the new announcements from SPC in this teamwork business process space that I love, because I have the need to do this all the time, is now not only can you share a link like you've been able to do to a PowerPoint deck, you can actually see right here on the menu, if you look at the screenshot, you can actually send a link directly to a particular slide. So if you're sending a deck to someone, rather than saying, here's the link, can you go look at slide 23, you can actually give them a link right to that. So when they click on it, they go to the slide that you want them to work on. Additionally, more work in OneDrive around the mobile space and the functionality in there, and also bringing differential sync both to mobile as well as to the OneDrive client. This was visually one of my favorite demos. If you watch the virtual summit, you'll see this. They actually went in, made a small edit in Paint inside of a massive, I believe it was over a gig image file. But what you see is that the entire file, because it only uploads the bits that changed, uploads all of those changes to OneDrive in a matter of seconds there. And there was a ton of other announcements kind of in this space. We also did do a lot of work in the keynote. We talked a lot about business processes. So the ability now, as you start to build SharePoint pages like team sites, to actually be able to include them directly inside of Teams. So you really start to see those worlds come together. There's a time and a place when people want to go out in the browser and they want to experience your intranet in that form. There's a time and a place where they want to get to that same content, and it makes sense, for example, as a tab or other ways to have that inside of Teams. We continue to bring those two together and continue to do a lot of work in that space, including here, you can see document libraries and such, the ability to actually build forms for SharePoint list inside of there, the ability to take lists that you already have in Excel and be able to import them directly and turn them into SharePoint list that you can use Microsoft Flow and other technologies from. You can see as you start to bring them in from an Excel document, for example, into a SharePoint list, the ability to have that modern, quick editing experience. And you notice a lot of the visuals that we've brought in here, the sorts, the formatting, all right inside of a SharePoint list. And there's a great case study out there if you're interested in looking at about how you use SharePoint in Teams. The great Marks and Spencer case study that will go into this a lot more. Now, once you've got those lists inside of SharePoint and you can start using things like Flow, you can also start taking advantages of things like cognitive services. So the ability is people say, take a photo, upload it to your SharePoint list. If you were, say, Marks and Spencer's, the case study we were just looking at, you'd be able to have, say, retail managers take pictures of end cap displays, have them upload to a SharePoint list, use cognitive services to evaluate those to actually find places where those end caps aren't properly displayed or that that you should do more work for. There were a ton of announcements at SPC targeted to administrators and making SharePoint in your intranet that much more manageable for you. Lots of work done around multi-geo, about data residency, whether it's the EU or other countries, and their support about the need to be able to manage that at a finer grade. You'll see here, as I said, there's a whole series of those administrative actions out there in the admin center. One of the most requested ones that will be available soon for an administrator is the ability to rename a site right inside the admin center. Today, for example, if you create a site and it's called Project Foo and your URL is whack sites, whack Project Foo, at a certain point that code name goes away, or maybe the team reorgs and now the team's got a new name and you want to change it. With SharePoint today, you can go in and change the text on the title of the page, but your URL will always be whack Project Foo or whack Team ABC. With the new site rename functionality, you can actually, when you go in and you change the name of the site from Team ABC to Team 123, not only will it change the page title, but you can actually have it change the URL as well. What's really cool about this is it actually does some DNS entries, just because we know that you have sharing links and you have people that have emailed the URL and such. So if you change it from Team ABC to Team 123, you don't want all of those links to break. And so we actually make all of the necessary DNS entries for you so that all of those old links continue to function, and so they will just redirect to the corresponding page on the new URL. Now, one of the biggest announcements out there, and probably the largest in the intranet space itself, was around home sites. Home sites will be available later this year, and they're really about creating that personalized landing experience for your organization. And so I'm going to drop out of PowerPoint here for a moment and actually come over here to my browser. And so you can see here, I've got up a home site here. Now, there's a few things you'll notice, especially if you're familiar with SharePoint. First off, these are just communication sites. So everything you do, everything you know about building communication sites completely applies to home sites. And so what you do is you create a communication site, And then as an administrator, there's a PowerShell commandlet you run, which takes that home site, or it takes, sorry, that communication site and makes it a home site. And when it does that, it gets certain superpowers, right? Some of those superpowers are, first off, it becomes an organizational news site. So what that means is, here I've got a couple of other organizational news sites like Leadership Connection and News at Contoso. And you can see how when that news shows up in my news web part here, we actually give it this visual cue. When you run that PowerShell commandlet, besides making it an organizational news site, you set your search site, or sorry, your search scope to be tenant wide. You also get the branding. So if you notice here, if you notice here, we've got the branding from Contoso Electronics and the blue and such. When I go off to the SharePoint start page, if you're familiar with SharePoint historically, we would sometimes refer to this as the SharePoint home page. It's now called the SharePoint start page. But you'll notice here, it looks very similar to what you're familiar with, but all of that branding from Contoso, the branding of my home site, my mega menu, all of that has followed me now to that SharePoint start page. I also have one-click access right back to that home site. So if I click here, you see I go right back to that home site. In fact, even if I was to go do something like, say, go off to Outlook, you notice that the Contoso branding or whatever company branding you've done follows me here into Outlook. I can, read my mail, etc. inside of Outlook. And again, with that one click, if I click here, again, I am taken right back to my home site. So you can see how it can take and bring that that home site into your organization as its landing page and its experience for everyone. Now, for the webinar, I'm showing you this here on my browser. It's easier to project, but all of this is totally native, totally responsive. So I have a great experience, a great view on my mobile device as well. In addition, we are making some updates to the SharePoint mobile application so that later this year you will have that same one-touch access back to the home site in the SharePoint mobile application, just like I'm showing you right here on my home site. Now, there are some other things you'll notice. We talked about at Ignite, and we've started the process of rolling out of two different features. One is the ability to have a communication site at your root, and the other is the ability to move an existing communication site to your root. We've started rolling out the COM site at the root, so some tenants have that. If your tenant doesn't have it, it will be coming soon. And the ability to move an existing COM site to the root level that you already have, that will come later on this year. But if you notice, my URL is simply contosoelectronics.sharepoint.com, and here I am landing right on my home site. Now, some other things here, like I said, home sites are just communication sites. And so you'll notice, I've got all the standard web parts I'm used to. Here I've put some great images to kind of tell, as the communicator, to tell my news and my company story visually. I've got a news aggregator down here that's pulling from lots of different sites around the intranet. You see the authoritative news branding that we were talking about earlier. But this is set up on my home site in this design here. This is personally relevant and targeted to me based on my persona and the news that's important to me. We've gone ahead here and we've connected up to Microsoft Stream, and so we've brought in a lot of different video that, bringing that rich multimedia here to tell that story. Now, as you think about designing and building a lot of these different home sites, it's not just about pushing news and information to folks. It's about having a two-way dialogue. And you can see right here, for example, we've brought in, oops, sorry about that. We've brought in conversations from across the company that's going on. In this case, this is powered on the back end by Yammer, but you can see I can do everything here if I want to like this, if I want to engage in this conversation and post. All of this can be done right here from on that home site as I am engaged with this experience. Same thing with Twitter feeds coming in that are coming from the company Twitter account and such. Now, another thing you might notice if you're familiar with SharePoint that's new is over here I have this vertical section. In this case on mine, it's on the right-hand side, kind of spanning down my entire page. This is a new design element that you can add to any communication site. And you can use it to make, if you need a richer content display or you want denser content on your site, this is a great use right here. The other thing you'll notice is there are a lot of new web parts. Everything you're seeing on this page are web parts right out of the box. And you'll notice a lot that we've chosen in this design to put in that vertical section are all very personal, whether it's, my recommendations, my frequent sites, my recent documents. You can see we've really worked in this layout here to make this right rail very specific to the user and to not just have them come here for news, but also to give them a reason to come here to find documents, find sites, bring them in for that, and then also allow them to see and hear the news that we want them to work through. Now, talking about a lot of that news, you can see here, whether it is the post about Miriam, our new CMO, or if you notice here inside of my email, the other thing I can do is I can meet people wherever they are. So, in this case, we've brought a lot of those different news items through just a roll-up digest that has come out. And so then I can click on that. And again, I come back here to the ability to read that news and continue on through my home site. Now, you can design a lot of these home sites in a lot of different ways. I'll show you a site here. This is something we actually didn't show in the keynote, but this is just a different take. You can see we built it on the same tenant, so that's why it's not at my root. But this is a darker design or a dark theme that we built out here. And so you can see, again, just different ways you can build out these home sites. Here we went with a little bit different hero layout. We went with some quick navigation to get people into benefits and a little bit different take on how we were using the right rail as well. So a lot of different options that you have here as you build these. Now, home sites are that experience at the top level of your intranet or your organization. But you can use communication sites a lot more broadly around the company. And so here's an example of a leadership connection site. This was actually modeled on a site that we have here inside of Microsoft that we use where Satya and his senior leadership team interact a lot with myself and the rest of the employees. And you can see here, again, just a different layout, but still very visual, very engaging to pull you in to the information that in this leadership site that the SLT, the senior leadership team, wants you to see. Again, using, in this case, sort of modern day blogging, if you will, from Patty Fernandez, who is the CEO of our favorite Contoso organization. And you can see how we can then pull through a lot of that video. So here we do have the ability to get in and actually see and engage with a lot of live events that you can produce and publish right to the site, as well as getting in and access to a lot of the prior communications and video that we might be interested in seeing. And just like we saw on the home site, again, here's some conversation being driven, on the back end with Yammer, but exposed right here inside of the Leadership Connection site for folks to engage with. And you can use comm sites in a lot of different ways here. So if I kind of click over, right here you can see a very different view of a comm site solving a completely different problem. In this case, we wanted to have a little bit of product training going on inside of the company. So rather than going out and building a unique, and custom bespoke solution, we've actually used SharePoint here on the Intelligent Intranet to drive all of this. So you can see using the quick links control here to get them to directions or registration. We've used the people web parts here to really bring the speakers to life. To have a small bio. If a person mouses over them, they have access to all the standard people process components that are available inside of SharePoint today. So if I wanted to, say, connect with Nestor ahead of the conference or the training, I could do that. I have access to, these are files that Nestor is working on, which I have permission to. So if I wanted to understand a little bit more about this before the event, I have that ability as well. The agendas, some of the scheduling, you can see here on the SharePoint site, I've actually brought in a map, a form for attendees to register for. And even in this case, I've connected it up to some prior training that we had that was relevant to different people that is pre-recorded that maybe I want them to watch ahead of time. Now, once I've got these different sites out there, whether they're team sites, whether they're communication sites, what's great about them is I can bring them into a hub and connect them together, right? So here, for example, I've built out this giving site here. And again, I've got a rich, beautiful site that people can interact with. But what I've done is I've actually made this part of a hub. And so what you'll see is the hub is my Contoso Works here. And you can see if I step up to the hub, I have access to all of the content from all those different sites, the news, the information, all rolls up to the hub for me. But you see here, I've got this unified navigation here. So if I wanted to go to that giving site, or all of our hub items at Contoso Works are all related to HR. So maybe I want to click over to the new employee orientation. And you notice that all of the color scheme, all of the branding moves automatically with all of the hub sites. And now what's great about this is that businesses change, organizations change, And if you move something, say the new employee orientation from the Contoso work site, which here happens to have a lot of teal in it, and I was to move it over to a different hub, maybe, you know, a hub focused around new employee and training experiences, and all of the theme and the branding of that was, say, orange instead of teal. When I move this from one hub to the next, all of the color schemes, all of the theming and the branding will change and pick up instantly from that new hub. All of the navigation will pick up instantly from that new hub. All of the news will stop rolling up to the Contoso Works and will instantly start rolling up to the training hub that we moved it to. So hubs give you a huge amount of flexibility of grouping your sites and changing them as your organization changes. And of course, the last set of sites I would talk about would be team sites. Communication sites are stretching across your organization. Hub sites are bringing together and collecting both communication and team sites into larger groupings inside your organization. Team sites are down at that level of the V team or the project team. And you can see here, as I've built out this site, I've done a lot of things here to really enable a particular team to collaborate. First off, you notice the team sites automatically get this navigation over here, slightly different than communication sites. But I've actually gone ahead and I've brought in here content from Microsoft Planner so we can track everything that's going on with our new Mark 8. I've got views over here of the timeline. I can see who's involved with those different items. I've got a little countdown web part. Again, pulling in that vertical section into my design. I've actually put a PowerPoint pitch deck here inside right here, so folks could, without having to open it, they could just flip through my deck. You can see here we've got links, we've got an embedded web part to all of the documents that are important for this team. We've got questions about operations going on right here inside of my team site. You can see kind of on my vertical section, I've got a web part with all the recent activity. So I get these very rich thumbnails of the different documents folks on the team are working on. I've brought news in here. So it really is able to make this kind of that one-stop shop for me around my team. So that's a tour through home sites and through a lot of the other different pieces of the intelligent intranet. You know, we talked about that vertical column. Here's a great screenshot. You see the home icon right here, giving you that one-touch ability, whether you're on your PC or on your smart device, right back to your organization's home site. We talked a lot about communication sites, how they can serve across the entire organization, how you can use hub sites to organize everything you do. Now, a lot of the sites that you saw were very rich. They were very beautiful. You know, not everybody has design as one of their superpowers and strengths. I definitely fall into that bucket. The greatest thing in art I can do is probably a poorly drawn stick figure. What's great though is if you go out to the SharePoint lookbook, whether you're very creative or whether you're like me and not so much, there are a lot of great designs out there to help you get inspired, really start to get you going. And what's great also is you are able to take these different designs. We now have a SharePoint online provisioning service. So you can go out to provisioning.sharepointpnp.com, and you can actually take a lot of these designs if you're a tenant admin, click a button and get these lookbook designs in your tenant, and then just start customizing and modifying them to meet the needs of your organization. So just a couple of other announcements just to sort of talk through before we open things up and talk about questions. Lots of work going on around Microsoft Stream. You saw how I'm able to not just have Stream as an independent product, but how I can bring all of that multimedia just very natively into my intranet. You now have the ability with Stream right from your mobile device to record and upload a video right from your phone. If you think about what a lot of organizations do today, they send around a piece of mail welcoming a new employee. They've usually got some quotes about the employee. Think about how you could do that on your team site or more broadly through your intranet. If you did that as a piece of SharePoint news, if the person just took their mobile app, recorded a little greeting so that it was in their own voice with their own face, saying it, and then you put that piece of video inside of the news item that you sent around to the organization. You saw on the Leadership Connection where I had the monthly Q&A from Patty, the CEO at Contoso. One of the things that will be available, in fact, is started rolling out already, is now the ability to add quizzes and polls directly inside of your video, so that if someone is watching a video, whether it's an event or a video that you've already got, you can have a Microsoft form pop up, ask some polling information or some questions or some quizzes, have them answer it, and then have the video feed continue from there. Search is also a key part of the intranet, and we continue to work on expanding and moving forward Microsoft 365 and search across all of it. There were some great demos I'd encourage you to look at if you go back and you watch the virtual summit. One of my favorite ones, and I'll show it to you quite briefly here, is simply when I click in search, you'll notice this new, what we call zero query functionality. So in this case, for me, since I don't do a whole lot on this site, it's a demo site, it's offering me news and files. But this is actually using a combination of AI about what I'm interacting with, as well as looking at the context of where it is here on this search site versus, say, here on the leadership site. So you'll notice that the options that it's offered me just when I click in there are actually different. It knows through AI what I do, what I'm interested in, what I have access to. It's also then factoring in that context. So as soon as I click here, it's actually trying to offer me things that it thinks I might be searching for before I even start typing a word. And if you watch the virtual summit, the demo tenant there was much more built out than my quick little one that I'm using here today. So you can see a lot more functionality inside of there. And so you'll start to see this coming not just inside your intranet site like we were looking at, but it is the same search if a user goes to office.com. It is the same search. You see that same zero query search as well, showing up here in this case inside of Microsoft Word. You see in the background there. So again, just adjusting and adapting based on where the user is, helping them find your information. This even goes out beyond just the walls of your intranet. If you start searching, for example, in this case for Daisy P here on Bing, you actually notice this little gray section. And if you look right here on the right-hand side, you'll see this little note that only Contoso employees can see this. So if someone is signed in on their browser to your organization and they start typing, not only do they get all of the web results below, they can actually see people, files, sites, etc. right there inside the browser, just like they see on your company intranet, just like they see in OneDrive. And as an admin, you can see, manage, and control all of this from one administrative section. And so that's a very quick tour through through a lot of different content, lots of different announcements. Like I said, I encourage you to definitely go out, check out the virtual webcast if you want to see any more of these in details. But I did want to make sure we had time here for Q&A. I saw some of them coming in. Do we have more questions, Vlad?
Thank you very much, Brad. And indeed, we have quite a few questions, some really interesting ones. So let's start a bit with the intranet, but since you covered a bit of the other announcements, there are some questions about them as well. But let's start with, will the home site web parts like My Frequent Sites, My Recommendations web part be available in a web part gallery to use in other sites or Office 365 groups once in GA, or will they only be inside the home site?
No, so I remember that a home site is nothing more than a communication site with superpowers, and you know, those superpowers being things like the tenant-wide scope, the organizational or the authoritative news, the one-click access. So anything I can do, design, build in a communication site is on a home site, and vice versa. Everything you saw on the home sites will be available on any communication site. Same thing, like if you noticed on the team site, for example, even though that was a team site, not a communication site, I was still using that vertical section there. Same thing is true with the web parts.
Awesome. There seems to be a bit of confusion because of the SharePoint Home before. Now we have home sites and SharePoint hubs. So a question I have here is, does the home site become the root SharePoint site collection?
For a lot of organizations, that's probably going to be the case. Initially, when things start launching in the near future, there will be one home site per organization. But if you notice from the name, there's an S on it. It is plural. We will be doing an update hopefully very soon after the release. For a lot of organizations, having that one home site makes sense. For example, inside of Microsoft, we have a site called MSW. That will be the home site for everyone inside of Microsoft. But we also know there are a lot of organizations that have different structures. Maybe they are a holding company or a conglomerate or such. And so we are doing work there to make sure that you can have multiple home sites in an organization. So if Sally is a member of company A and Bob is a member of company B, they could have two different home sites. So the home sites, think of them sort of as that top level inside your organization. Underneath that, hub sites are really about grouping particular sites together. So like in my example, I grouped a bunch of related HR sites that are maybe HR and benefits and new employee. Maybe I use hubs to group together a bunch of sites around a given vice president or sales or marketing, etc. does that help answer the question?
I think it does for me. If any attendee wants to add any additional questions, put it in the Q&A, and at the end, if we have time, we're going to discuss more about this if there's other questions. A question from Louis now. Will there be any out-of-the-box options for, like, say, a birthday web part or an anniversary web part planned from Microsoft?
Not at this time. We're constantly looking for places places customers want us to go. I would encourage you to go out to the user voice site, put this out there as a suggestion. If you believe strongly in it, lobby your friends in the community to vote it up, and we use that user voice feedback as sort of one of the key ways we prioritize what we build and when we build it.
Thank you. And Louis, just a bit of marketing, since I work for an intranet partner at Valo Intranet, we have it. So make sure to check it out at valointranet.com. And that was not a planted question, by the way, but I had to.
and I mean that is sort of a great point, which is, we will never build everything. One, just because there's not enough time and developer resources, and two, like, we try to hit the broad, as broad breadth things as we can. But Valo is a great example of the partner ecosystem and the places that they fill in that we don't, and quite possibly won't for the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Now a question that I actually got from both Allison and Greg about on-prem. Is there any plan to bring any of those features to SharePoint 2019 through a feature pack or to a future version of SharePoint on premises?
I never want to say never, because that's a very definitive statement. But so let me make a broader statement, which is a lot of the work that is going on now. It requires a lot of the infrastructure that is only available in the cloud. For example, a lot of the AI work and a lot of the other pieces, they're very, very hard, if not in some cases impossible, to bring down into an on-prem version. So I would strongly encourage folks to really make that migration from on-prem to SharePoint Online. You're going to see, a tremendous amount of innovation coming there, which is not, for a multitude of technical reasons, going to make its way down into that on-prem space in there. So if you're still on-prem, I would definitely start thinking about when is the right time to make that move. What is the right way to do it? There are plenty of partners such as Valo that you can talk to about making that move as well.
Awesome. Now let me talk to you about actually two questions related to the site rename, since you talked a bit about it. Any ability to rename the root site for a tenant? So I guess this is the tenant rename functionality of, instead of vlad.sharepoint.com, you want to rebrand to companyname.sharepoint.com.
No, simply the rename functionality that we were talking about was related to a SharePoint site, not a tenant. So in my demo case, Contoso Electronics 1A is Contoso Electronics 1A forever, or until we release that functionality and feature.
And related to the site change, when the site URL gets changed, will it automatically update the data connector used in the Power Apps or flow that point to that site?
Ooh, that's a very specific question.
We
I
can keep that
believe
one for
the
later.
answer is yes. Um, just because of the way the different updates that it makes to preserve all of those links. But I have never asked that question in particular. I'd say with pretty good confidence, yes, but don't quote me on it.
Awesome. Next up, about search now. When is Custom Refiners coming to modern search or Microsoft search?
Uh, Good question. Um, I am not the search subject matter expert, so I do not know the answer to that. I am happy if we have the email address of the person that asked that, Vlad, feel free to connect you, me, and them, and I will get them to the correct person to answer that question.
Awesome, I will. Okay, now back a bit to the intranet. Brad, you showed some great example of communication sites. Did you use all right out of the box web parts, or did you also use apps that you had to go and download to use?
So I started a lot of mine. A lot of the things that you saw in the demo were started. Actually, I just went to that SharePoint provisioning site and shot them into my tenant. They are all standard web parts out there, so I didn't spend any time writing any custom code or building anything in particular.
Okay, awesome. Let's see what else. We have time for two or three more questions. One of them here from Jake about the text web part. Will the text web part be improved to allow inline images to be inserted into the content?
Um, I have no particular feature announcement to make on that. I would, similar to my prior response, I'd encourage folks to go out to user voice. And when you go out there, if you have particular items like this that you want to see, definitely put them in. But even folks on the call that aren't like, well, I have a particular feature request, I'd encourage you to go visit user voice because you can vote up items. So look through the items that are out there. If something you're like, oh, didn't even think about that, but wow, that's really important and that would be very useful in my organization, definitely vote it up. Just because posting the ideas and voting is really one of the best sources of feedback we have to understand how many people are looking for things. Like, you know, no one believes inside of Microsoft that we know everything and we have every great idea. So if you have an idea, or a challenge or a blocker, post it out there so that we are aware of it.
Great. And one last question. And this one is a bit about search, but it's a bit more general based. From Keith, hi, are there any plans to expand search so that any search result will show results from all applications? For example, if I'm searching in SharePoint, having the ability to have my Outlook email results appear.
So you can, if you look at some of the screenshots there, if you look at the demo on the virtual summit, if you look at some of the things, if folks have this enabled on their own tenants, you'll start to see that, through a lot of these different search surfaces, you'll see people, you'll see documents. We use a lot of this inside of Windows 10 as well. So you can actually see mail items in Windows 10. And so I think you can see where we're going. I don't have particular announcements to make of, X, Y, and Z new data types will start showing up, but you can certainly see a clear path that we are going down where search brings everything, whether, I type in, like I showed in that one screenshot, Daisy P, and I get a people card, or I type in, Supercharge or SharePoint Intranet, and I get this PowerPoint that we're looking at. Like, content is content, and we will continue to move down that path.
Awesome. Well, this is it for the main questions. If I understood correctly, Brad, all of this will be available for everybody this year, so in calendar year 2019. Am I correct?
So yeah, each of the different slides, if you noticed, had a little bit of timing on there. If folks have a particular item of interest, if you looked in the upper right, it'll give you a good estimate of the time up there. I would be careful of promising every single thing will be available this calendar year, just because, it's software and it's engineering. Sometimes, we try to give the best dates we can, but sometimes things slip.
Awesome. Well, at least we know a bit what to expect, and the slides will be available. Everybody who has joined the webinar, I'll make sure to get them from Brad and also share them to everybody by the end of the week. So then, as Brad mentioned, you're going to have the expected date of release at the top of everyone. Well, Brad, thank you very much for your time. We're at the end of the hour, and I know you're super busy. Thank you on behalf of the community for joining us for this webinar and sharing the news with everybody that was not able to attend SPC.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for folks joining, and I would encourage you all, just go out to the SharePoint Virtual Summit and watch the keynote in all of its glory and some of the additional content out there.